Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine finding yourself suddenly arrested, questioned about something utterly bewildering, and just watching your entire life turn upside down in an instant. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a profoundly personal and, frankly, quite traumatic journey through the justice system. It's a story where digital evidence, alleged police misconduct, and the immense human toll really intersect in some unsettling ways.
Yeah, this deep dive truly offers a rare and very candid look at that intersection. You've got information security expertise clashing with legal processes, and then the critical, often sort of overlooked importance of proper procedure.
Especially with digital forensics, right?
Exactly, particularly when it comes to digital forensics. What's truly striking here is the stark contrast between what was alleged, the big claims, and the verifiable technical facts on the ground.
Hmm.
And also how profoundly human factors, things like biases, power dynamics, individual conduct, how they can really shape the outcome in these, incredibly high-stakes situations.
So our mission today is to meticulously sift through this collection of, well, raw audio and personal accounts. We want to extract key insights on precisely how official processes impact individuals, especially now in our increasingly digital age.
And the challenges, too.
Yes, and examine the immense challenges of seeking justice when trust, that fundamental trust, has been just completely broken. It's about understanding the complex nuances of what became a highly frustrating and deeply traumatic experience for one person.
It really is.
So if you've ever found yourself wondering about, say, the inherent vulnerability of your personal data, or maybe the intricate complexities of legal proceedings.
Or just how someone navigates that kind of overwhelming system.
Exactly. Or simply how one person navigates an overwhelmingly opaque and powerful system, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah.
We're going to walk through this experience step by step. We'll try to shed light on some surprising facts and draw out critical lessons that, honestly, resonate far beyond this single case.
Okay.
So let's set the scene. Our story begins with Alberto. He's an information security professional, got 2 decades of experience under his belt.
20 years, yeah. A seasoned pro.
Right. And it's a quiet Saturday in September 2017. He was suddenly arrested by Interpol, the International Policing Organization.
Interpol. Okay, so big players involved right from the start.
Absolutely. But here's a detail that immediately sets a concerning tone. He was taken in without being told why.
Wow, just arrested, no explanation.
None initially. Imagine that scenario. One moment you're just going about your weekend, maybe having a quiet coffee, and the next you're being apprehended by an authority that operates globally.
And you're utterly in the dark.
Utterly in the dark about why. This unexpected arrest happened on September 9, 2017. And from the outset, Alberto describes himself as being profoundly disoriented.
I can only imagine.
He was simply brought in, seated, and then subjected to this onslaught of questions without any context. Zero. It's a situation that would unsettle anyone, let alone someone like him, who's used to order and logical processes,
Of course. His whole professional life is about structure and understanding systems.
Exactly. He vividly recalls feeling totally lost during this initial phase, just unable to comprehend the bewildering situation he was suddenly thrust into.
So one immediate question that just jumps out is, what are the established protocols here? When an individual is detained, especially without immediate disclosure of charges.
Right, what should happen?
Well, the lack of information itself in that kind of setting can be an incredibly potent psychological tool. And it appears in this instance it might have been quite deliberately designed to disorient, to create immediate vulnerability. Alberto recounted how he was just seated, facing this barrage of questions, and for a significant period, he genuinely didn't understand what was happening or why he was even there.
So when did he start to get any clue?
It was only when the interrogators started pressing him about a specific mutualista, that's a health insurance provider, that a glimmer of recognition appeared.
Okay.
Because he had, in fact, previously reported significant security vulnerabilities to this very mutualista back in 2014 or 2015.
So he'd had contact with them before, professionally.
Yes, trying to help them proactively address potential issues.
Yeah.
His initial, very natural thought, given his background and, his prior actions, was, okay, maybe they've called me in for some kind of consultation, given my expertise in information security.
That makes perfect sense. He tried to help them. Now maybe they need his expertise again.
Exactly. But the reality, as it quickly unfolded, proved far more sinister and far less professional than any kind of consultation.
That's a completely natural assumption for someone in his field to make, though, especially if you've acted responsibly before. But the interrogation tactics, Well, they were a world away from any collaborative consultation.
Sounds like it.
Alberto was then asked a very specific, very pointed question. Did you access such and such website.com?
Okay, getting specific now.
Yes. And his response, understandably, given the confusion and lack of context, was vague. He said something like, could be yes, could be no.
Which sounds honest if you genuinely don't remember or understand the context.
Right. But this ambiguity, born of that confusion, seemed to be the trigger for a significant escalation in the interrogation's tone.
How so?
He described a person standing directly in front of him who then stated, with this overt dismissiveness, you don't remember that. Do you think I'll help you remember?
Yeah, okay. That's aggressive.
Very. And when Alberto, quite reasonably, tried to get some clarity in this completely confusing high-stress situation by asking for the person's name.
Which seems like a basic right, or at least a courtesy.
You'd think. But they simply laughed at him. Laughed and refused to respond.
Just refused to give their name.
Refused. This deliberate withholding of identity, coupled with that air of superiority and mockery, immediately signals a profound power imbalance and a, frankly, concerning disregard for basic courtesy, let alone any established legal protocol around detention and interrogation.
Indeed. That behavior points not just to an aggressive approach, but possibly to a deliberate strategy to maintain absolute control and leverage Alberto's palpable anxiety.
He must have been incredibly anxious.
Absolutely. Throughout this initial interrogation, Alberto, feeling incredibly nervous, found himself continuously crossing his legs, which is, a very common involuntary physical sign of extreme stress and discomfort.
Sure, lots of people do that when nervous.
Exactly. However, the interrogator repeatedly and emphatically shouted at him, "Don't cross your legs!"
Shouted, over crossing his legs.
That's what Alberto describes. He felt completely lost regarding his rights at this point. He didn't know if he was required to identify this person, if this command was even legitimate in that setting.
Total confusion.
Right. And a critical consideration here is the individual's right to information and, frankly, to some basic comfort during detention. This account starkly underscores how easily those fundamental rights can just be obscured or overridden by an aggressive, disorienting approach.
It sounds like the whole environment was designed to instill fear.
Precisely. Fear and profound confusion, leaving Alberto feeling entirely at the mercy of his interrogators.
And the situation, it didn't get better, did it?
Yeah.
It actually deteriorated even further.
How so?
The interrogator, who was later identified as Wilson Rodríguez, allegedly resorted to deeply personal and emotionally manipulative threats.
Threats? Against whom?
Against his family. Alberto explicitly recounts Rodríguez threatening his mother and his girlfriend, stating, with chilling clarity, Alberto, it's better for you to confess this, because if not, we will make your mother and your girlfriend suffer a lot. We will destroy your girlfriend.
Oh my God. Threatening family, that crosses a line, a very serious line.
A huge line. And this profoundly disturbing statement Alberto describes was delivered with a smile that made him feel the person was actively enjoying his distress.
That's just sadistic.
He described it as a deliberate tactic to exploit his deepest vulnerabilities, knowing that family is a profound weakness for most people.
Of course it is.
Imagine yourself in that position. You're completely disoriented, you have no clear understanding of your rights, and you're facing direct threats against your loved ones. How would any of us truly react under such immense targeted pressure?
It's almost impossible to contemplate rationally.
It paints a vivid and deeply unsettling picture of the psychological warfare individuals can face in these situations, where mental coercion can be just as potent, just as damaging as physical force, all designed, it seems, to break a person down and elicit a confession, regardless of its truth or accuracy.
And this specific tactic, the direct targeting of an individual's family, it's a well-documented psychological pressure point, used in interrogations precisely because it's so effective at inducing fear.
It bypasses rational thought.
Completely. Its design is to bypass rational thought processes and induce immediate compliance through overwhelming fear. This approach fundamentally crosses a critical ethical boundary, a procedural boundary, and it undermines the entire integrity of any interrogation and any subsequent confession.
Definitely.
The fact that it was delivered with a smile, as Alberto vividly describes, suggests an individual who not only employs these tactics without apparent compunction, but chillingly, may also derive some degree of satisfaction from the distress they inflict.
That's terrifying.
It's a stark reminder that even within official proceedings, the human element, personalities, inherent biases, even the perceived enjoyment of power, can profoundly shape an individual's experience of the justice system, often, tragically, for the worse.
Yeah.
The key insight here really is that such manipulative tactics immediately compromise the legitimacy of the entire process. It makes any outcomes highly, highly suspect.
So what's the immediate takeaway from all this? Eventually, after that harrowing start, Alberto learned the precise nature of the incredibly serious accusation leveled against him.
Okay, so what was it specifically?
He was accused of hacking a database. Specifically from the Catholic Circle, that's the Círculo Católico Mutualista we mentioned earlier.
The one he'd previously tried to help with security issues.
The very same one. The accusation involved a massive breach of patient data, including, very emotively, data of cancer patients.
Wow. Sensitive data.
Extremely sensitive.
Yeah.
And demanding bitcoins as ransom.
Okay, so hacking, massive data theft of patient records, and a Bitcoin ransom demand. That's the core allegation.
That was the core accusation that directly led to his arrest and that interrogation we just discussed. It painted him as a malicious, financially motivated cybercriminal.
Okay. This brings us to a really crucial point. How do these extremely serious allegations actually stand up against the actual verifiable technical evidence?
Right. The digital reality.
Exactly. For anyone familiar with information security, every action, especially within network systems, leaves a digital footprint. It leaves traces. And the sheer scale of data involved is always a critical factor.
And the accusation was big, right?
Huge. The accusation was that Alberto had successfully stolen a staggering 200,000 medical records.
200,000.
200,000. That is an enormous volume of data, particularly when you consider the highly sensitive nature of patient information. It often includes images, diagnostic reports, detailed medical histories. It carries immense ethical, privacy, and legal implications.
Absolutely. And the alleged demand for bitcoins, that's a very specific element, too. It links the accusation directly to that common illicit financial gain mechanism you see in modern cybercrime. It adds another layer of seriousness.
Precisely. However, and this is a huge however, when Alberto, after many arduous months, and only after he finally gained access to his case file.
So he couldn't even check this initially.
No, not while detained. Only later. When he was finally able to meticulously verify the system logs, the detailed audit trails of the Mutualistas network, he uncovered some truly critical discrepancies.
Okay, what did the logs show?
He found undeniable evidence that the total outgoing traffic from the Mutualista on the precise day of the alleged hack was only 150 megabytes.
Oh, wait. 150 megabytes.
Yeah.
Total outgoing traffic.
Total. For the entire day, they claim this massive breach happened. Now, for those of you working with data, 150 megabyte is, it's minuscule.
It's tiny.
It really is. To put that in context, it's roughly equivalent to maybe a small handful of high-resolution digital photographs, or perhaps just a few very short video clips.
So let me get this straight. They accused him of stealing 200,000 medical records, potentially complex files with images and history.
Correct.
But the total data leaving their network that day was only 150 megabytes. Barely enough for, 5 or 6 MP3 songs?
Exactly that kind of scale. 5 or 6 MP3s, maybe?
That's not just disproportionate. That sounds technically impossible.
It absolutely is impossible. Alberto's conclusion, as an information security professional with, remember, 2 decades of practical experience dealing with data volumes.
He knows his stuff.
He knows his stuff. His conclusion was unequivocal. It is fundamentally impossible to exfiltrate or steal 200,000 medical records with a mere 150 megabyte of data transfer.
Just can't be done.
Cannot be done. Consider that medical records often contain not just text, but detailed diagnostic images, lab results, structured database information, all of which contribute significantly to file size. Even if you had extreme compression, which is unlikely for such diverse data types in real-time exfiltration, such a vast quantity simply could not fit within that tiny bandwidth.
Okay, that completely blows a hole in the main accusation.
Immediately, it definitively casts severe doubt on the technical understanding of the accusers, and by extension, the fundamental validity of their central claim.
What about the Bitcoin demand? Did the logs show anything there?
Well, regarding the alleged Bitcoin demand, Alberto noted something else crucial. If Bitcoins were truly requested as ransom, there would necessarily need to be a specific publicly trackable Bitcoin address provided. You need somewhere to send the money.
Makes sense. You need an address.
Right. He explicitly stated, here, nothing happened. They didn't put a Bitcoin address. He pointed out that even if, hypothetically, he had wanted to comply with such a demand, there was no final verifiable address provided. no destination, which renders the whole ransom demand completely unfeasible.
So no technical way to steal the data they claimed, and no practical way to pay the ransom they claimed was demanded.
Precisely. The technical and practical realities just didn't match the story being told.
This is such a critical pivot point in the entire narrative. You have this massive, headline-grabbing accusation.
Very serious, very damaging.
But the digital evidence, when someone who actually understands it properly analyzes it, simply does not support the scale or even the core mechanics of the claim.
It collapses under basic scrutiny.
It really forces you to wonder how well-equipped authorities truly are to handle technically complex cybercrime cases like this, where a fundamental misunderstanding of basic data volume or the very mechanics of cryptocurrency can lead to entirely baseless and devastating accusations.
It's a huge question.
The key insight here, for any digital investigation surely, is that basic data volume analysis, just looking at the logs, can immediately expose profound technical ignorance. Or worse, maybe deliberate fabrication at the heart of an allegation.
Or both.
The specific details here, the 150 millib, the lack of a Bitcoin address, they aren't just trivial, they are the bedrock of the entire case, and they utterly fail to hold up. So after that deeply flawed interrogation, Alberto was placed in preventative detention. And this wasn't just a brief inconvenience, was it?
No, not at all. It became a period fraught with severe health challenges and a profound, lasting emotional impact.
How long was he held initially, and where?
He spent 2 harrowing days in what he called a caboso, which is essentially a very basic detention cell, often overcrowded, often unhygienic.
And he has pre-existing health conditions.
Yes, critically. He suffers from chronic asthma and severe anxiety, and he's medicated daily for both of these conditions.
So being in a stressful detention cell would be particularly bad for him?
Acutely difficult. He explicitly described experiencing both a severe asthma attack and a debilitating anxiety attack during just those first 2 days in detention. He characterized it as a snowball effect. The stress worsened the conditions worsened the stress.
A vicious cycle.
Exactly. And his repeated, desperate requests for his medication, the medication he needs to manage these serious health issues.
Were they provided?
According to him, they were completely ignored.
Completely ignored while having asthma and anxiety attacks.
That's his account.
Yeah.
He said he felt he was not being treated like a person and that his critical health issues were not considered at all by his captors. It added this layer of dehumanization to the already overwhelming stress.
That's appalling, neglecting serious medical needs like that.
It really highlights the devastating personal cost of such an experience, particularly when fundamental health needs are neglected in a custodial environment. And placing this within a larger context, the trauma of such an ordeal often extends far, far beyond the immediate period of detention itself.
How long was he ultimately held in preventative detention?
He was held from his initial arrest in September 2017 until he was finally released in May 2018.
May 2018. So September 17 to May 18.
Yeah.
That's 8 months.
8 months. A staggering 8 months of his life spent in custody, a significant and formative period compounded by the dire physical and psychological consequences he suffered due to the lack of proper medical care and the immense stress of the entire situation.
Yeah.
The physical and emotional neglect he experienced during these months, combined with the underlying injustice, clearly laid the groundwork for severe long-term impacts on his well-being.
8 months. That's an incredibly long time to be held, especially for someone with known health conditions that were explicitly ignored. And the impact, as you said, didn't just end the moment he walked out, did it?
Far from it. The impact has been profound and long-lasting. Alberto has been suffering from chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and severe clinical depression for what he describes as several years at the time of the recording.
Still suffering years later.
Yes, specifically, 5 long years following the incident. He continues to undergo intensive psychological treatment just to cope with the profound aftermath.
5 years of treatment.
He recounted being totally destroyed psychologically and professionally paralyzed. Utterly paralyzed. He states unequivocally that he was rendered unable to work for 5 full years following the incident.
5 years without work. For a professional with 20 years of experience.
A catastrophic blow, especially in a highly specialized field like information security, which moves so fast. The trauma was so severe, so debilitating, that he was even interned in a clinic due to the overwhelming psychological consequences. He required professional inpatient care.
Wow. That's absolutely devastating. It really drives home that it's not just about the legal outcome, innocent or guilty. It's about the complete derailment of a person's life, their career, their fundamental mental well-being. This is the true, often hidden cost.
It is profoundly so, and the ongoing insidious effects are evident even now, even when he's just discussing these painful events.
It's still raw for him.
Very. Alberto explained that the very act of recounting these experiences, even years later, triggers very bad reactions. It makes him feel altered, disturbed, like he's reliving the trauma all over again.
I can understand that.
He even mentioned having a heated argument with his own mother over discussing these topics because it brings back such terrible, visceral memories for him. It's that deeply embedded.
So the professional impact, has he recovered?
Tragically, no. Despite being a highly experienced 20-year information security professional, he states with profound sadness and resignation, never again worked, and never again could take responsibility in any job.
Never worked again.
That's what he says. His life, he emphasizes, changed completely, irrevocably altered by this ordeal. The key insight here, I think, is that the true cost of these systemic failures in justice can lead to life-altering psychological trauma and professional paralysis. It extends far beyond the immediate legal verdict and leaves these deep, lasting scars that can dismantle a person's identity and that entire future.
Okay, so beyond the interrogation, beyond the debilitating detention and its aftermath, there's another deeply concerning aspect of this case, and that involves the seizure of Alberto's personal property and, perhaps even more critically, the apparent gross mishandling of digital evidence.
Right, and this is where the intricate rules of digital forensics become absolutely paramount. Alberto's account reveals some truly alarming irregularities that go right to the heart of investigative integrity.
What did he describe happening during the seizure?
Well, he describes how officials allegedly just started putting everything into boxes without any proper registration or inventory being made at the time.
Grabbing stuff and boxing it up.
That's the picture painted. And as anyone in law enforcement or forensics knows, that's a fundamental breach of protocol right from the start. Meticulous documentation, logging everything as it's found and seized is absolutely essential.
Why is that so critical?
It's essential for maintaining what's known as the chain of custody. This is the documented trail that shows exactly who handled the evidence, when, where, and why, from the moment it's seized until it's presented in court. Without it, the evidence's integrity is questionable.
And Alberto specifically mentioned issues with this chain of custody.
Yes, explicitly. This concept is absolutely fundamental in digital forensics. Any deviation from established protocol like moving items without logging, failing to properly inventory them, or, crucially, connecting seized digital devices without rigorous, documented procedures can contaminate the evidence.
Contaminate. What does that mean in practice?
It means its reliability is compromised. It could potentially render it inadmissible in court and fundamentally undermine the entire case built upon it.
And Alberto alleged specific deviations.
He did. He claims that items were supposedly added to a mochila, a backpack, after he was taken to the courthouse. Not at his home during the initial official seizure.
Added later, outside his presence.
That's the allegation, which, if true, is a critical violation, implying evidence was moved or even potentially added without proper record and outside his observation. That directly violates the chain of custody.
That's a serious claim.
Very serious. And even more critically, he states that things that later appeared in the Acta de Incautación, the official seizure report.
The official list of seized items.
Correct. Were not actually registered at his house during the initial search. They were only partially documented later, apparently at Interpol's facility.
So the official report doesn't accurately reflect what was taken from his home at the time.
According to him, no. Which utterly undermines the authenticity of the seizure process itself. It raises serious questions about the origin and the legitimacy of the alleged evidence listed on that official document.
So this isn't just about, some missing items or a simple clerical error. It sounds like it challenges the foundational integrity of the entire investigation's physical evidence.
Precisely. If the evidence upon which a case is built is contaminated, or if its origin and handling are suspect, how can justice truly be served?
Yeah.
Alberto emphasizes that, supposedly in training, everything they do the moment they enter has to be properly registered. This highlights a stark and frankly worrying contrast between purported training standards and the actual on-the-ground practice he experienced.
What kind of things were seized?
He recounted specific items, including, somewhat bizarrely, what he described as 2 plastic Bitcoin coins.
Plastic, Bitcoin coins, like novelty items.
Exactly, like souvenir tokens,
Like-
which authorities apparently mistakenly believed were actual valuable digital Bitcoins.
Seriously, they thought plastic coins were real Bitcoins.
That's his claim. And he says this led to significant ridicule later within the information security community when the details came out.
I mean, wow. That detail alone reveals a profound lack of basic technical understanding regarding cryptocurrency, which is a critical knowledge gap when you're investigating alleged cybercrime involving Bitcoin ransom demands.
Indeed. The implications of that kind of ignorance are significant and far-reaching. It calls the entire investigation's competence into question.
What else was taken?
Beyond the plastic coins, multiple cell phones were seized. Alberto states he actually owned 10, but only 5 were listed as seized, adding another layer of discrepancy.
Okay, so incomplete seizure records again.
Seems so. Also, pen drives, credit cards, work ID cards, and even public transport cards, like an STM card used in Montevideo. Basically, as he put it, all the tools that were definitely work instruments for me.
Making their proper handling even more crucial if they're work tools needed for his profession.
Absolutely. But the most critical point regarding evidence contamination involves an apagado, a powered-off cell phone that was seized.
Okay, a phone seized while it was off. What happened with it?
Alberto claims it was allegedly turned on without his presence or consent, and its security code was requested from him.
Turned on without him there. That sounds like a major forensic no-no.
It is. And even more alarmingly, later forensic evidence apparently showed that this same phone was connected to the police network for a full 5 days.
5 days. Connected to a police network. After being seized while off, and without his consent or observation.
That's the allegation. It sounds like a catastrophic breach of digital forensic protocol.
Why is connecting it to a network so bad?
It's an egregious breach. Alberto states unequivocally, and he's right, that a seized digital device, particularly a cell phone, can never be connected to any network remotely or interact with an unauthorized environment after seizure. The risk is immense.
What kind of risk?
He highlights the extreme and undeniable risk. If the owner were actually a criminal, they could potentially remotely send a command to erase all information on the device once it connects to a network.
Oh, okay. A remote wipe command.
Exactly. Or even worse, potentially plant false evidence on the device remotely, fundamentally altering its state and destroying its evidentiary value.
So connecting it compromises everything.
Completely. This isn't some minor technicality. It is a fundamental principle of digital forensics. It's designed to preserve the integrity and authenticity of the evidence. Any deviation destroys that.
And were these actions documented? The phone being turned on, connected?
That's another key point. Any actions performed on seized devices must be meticulously recorded in the expediente, the official case file. If an action is not recorded, it wasn't done in a legally binding sense.
Right. The official record is everything.
But Alberto claims there is undeniable proof that actions not recorded in the file were indeed performed on his devices, leading, in his words, to a totally altered version of the facts being presented as evidence.
So unrecorded, potentially compromising actions were taken on seized digital evidence.
That's the core of his claim regarding the evidence handling. The key insight here is the absolutely non-negotiable importance of strict chain of custody and proper digital forensics protocols. Any deviation, especially something as blatant as connecting a seized device to an unauthorized network, catastrophically compromises the integrity of the evidence, and by extension, the entire legal process that relies on it.
It really raises serious questions, doesn't it, about the technical competence, the procedural adherence, maybe even the motives of those handling such sensitive materials.
It does, and about the fairness of any legal process that relies on potentially compromised evidence.
Okay, so despite this whole profound ordeal, the flawed interrogation, the detention, the questionable evidence handling there was eventually a glimmer of hope, right? A point where the system seemed to offer some resolution.
Yes, there was. Eventually, the judge determined that nothing seized from Alberto was legitimately related to any crime.
So the judge essentially agreed the seized items weren't evidence of wrongdoing.
Correct. And subsequently, the judge ordered everything to be returned to Alberto.
Okay, that sounds like a positive step. Justice prevailing, perhaps?
You would think so, but even that simple, clear judicial order, as we've heard, became yet another insurmountable hurdle. It illustrates this persistent resistance within the system.
What happened? Why weren't things returned?
Alberto describes encountering what he calls ridiculous justifications given by Wilson Rodríguez and his team specifically to prevent the full return of his property.
Justifications for not following a judge's order.
Apparently. He claims these justifications displayed, in his view, total ignorance on the topic from a technical standpoint, things that would baffle even a layperson, let alone an expert like him.
So, invalid reasons based on technical misunderstanding.
That's his assessment. And the result is that even now, years later, some items, crucial items for his professional life, have still not been returned, despite that clear, unequivocal judicial order.
Still not returned. Years later.
Still not returned. It clearly demonstrates a kind of systemic resistance where, even when you get a favorable ruling, new, frustrating obstacles are thrown up, preventing basic restitution.
That must be incredibly frustrating. To win in court, but still not get your property back.
Immensely frustrating. And this is where the distinction between different parts of the justice system becomes starkly apparent. It brings us to a crucial question. When internal processes fail so spectacularly or are seemingly obstructed like this, what are the legitimate avenues for accountability, for recourse?
What are they trying to do now?
Alberto and his mother are actively trying to take civil actions. They're basing these on declarations made during the process and the alleged misconduct they experienced.
Civil action, not criminal.
Yes, civil action seeking damages or other remedies. Interestingly, they were advised by a lawyer to bypass internal affairs, the police's own disciplinary body.
Why bypass internal affairs?
The advice was that internal affairs might only intervene in the most severe, clear-cut cases. So they were advised to go directly to Fiscalia, the prosecutor's office, with their compelling evidence of misconduct.
Straight to the prosecutor's office.
Yes. But this underscores the immense difficulty in just navigating the labyrinthine legal system. Where is the appropriate channel for a complaint? It's not always clear. Different departments have varying thresholds, different levels of willingness to engage. It often leaves individuals feeling bounced around, lost in bureaucracy.
It sounds exactly like they're being endlessly bounced around, just trying desperately to find someone, anyone, who will actually listen to their claims of misconduct and act decisively.
Exactly. There's profound frustration described, particularly with the perception that a specific judge, referred to as Juan Carlos, was either unaware of the correct procedure for lodging their complaints, or perhaps that they were being deliberately misled about where to file.
So either incompetence or deliberate obstruction within the system itself.
That's the feeling they were left with. This bureaucratic inertia, coupled with a perceived lack of knowledge or maybe deliberate obfuscation, only deepens the trauma. It exacerbates their sense of injustice.
And Alberto has made some very strong accusations directly against Wilson Rodríguez, hasn't he?
Extremely strong. He's gone so far as to call him a delinquente, a delinquent, and a ladrón, a thief.
A thief? Why?
For allegedly stealing bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies. He specifically referenced a tutorial Rodríguez supposedly downloaded onto a work computer about how to access cryptocurrencies.
A tutorial on crypto, downloaded by the investigating officer.
That's the claim. Alberto implies this shows not just profound technical incompetence needing a tutorial after seizing plastic bitcoins, but potentially a deliberate intent to misuse or steal digital assets. This, of course, further fuels Alberto's belief that Rodríguez wasn't just unprofessional, but was actively engaged in criminal misconduct himself.
Wow. That adds a whole other layer to it. And the impact of all this wasn't just confined to the internal legal system, was it? It clearly spilled out into the public sphere.
Yes, dramatically so. And damagingly. Alberto notes that immediately after his arrest, while he was still completely incommunicado, couldn't talk to anyone, couldn't defend himself.
Right, while he was detained.
Exactly. News articles were published stating he had a criminal past and had accessed third-party bank accounts, neither of which, he maintains, was true.
Published while he couldn't respond.
Yes. This public dissemination of potentially false and highly damaging information without any opportunity for rebuttal is essentially a form of character assassination.
Definitely. It poisons the well immediately.
And he strongly suggests that Wilson Rodríguez might have deliberately sought to destroy his reputation. He cites how everyone in the relevant tech and legal circles knew about his case and, ironically, ended up laughing at the police for confiscating those plastic bitcoins.
So the police incompetence became public knowledge.
Apparently so. But that detail, while making the authorities look foolish, didn't undo the initial damage to Alberto's reputation from the serious, albeit unfounded, accusations. This public humiliation, fueled by potentially false information leaks and profound technical misunderstanding, added yet another devastating layer of injury.
It really does sound like a deliberate character assassination campaign, compounding the legal nightmare and the personal torment, making it almost impossible for him to regain his professional standing.
Indeed. And Alberto expresses deep frustration that Wilson Rodríguez, in his perception, se cree que es juez, fiscal, perito, basically, that he believes he is a judge, prosecutor, and expert witness all rolled into one.
Acting outside his role.
Consistently overstepping his professional boundaries, according to Alberto, and operating with what he perceived as unchecked power and arrogance.
Any examples of that?
He even recounts an instance, a truly bizarre one, where Rodríguez allegedly asked him, Alberto, for help with current Bitcoin scams circulating in the market.
Ask the man he arrested for Bitcoin crimes for help with Bitcoin scams.
Exactly. Despite having arrested him for alleged Bitcoin-related crimes and supposedly confiscating his plastic Bitcoins, this profound irony just underscores the deep disconnect between Rodríguez's actions and his actual understanding of the field. It highlights a significant knowledge gap alongside the alleged misconduct.
That's incredible.
Furthermore, Alberto highlights his own professional background, which makes the situation even more perplexing. He had previously worked extensively on child pornography law enforcement back in 2014. He'd even conducted forensic procedures with a well-known expert, Luis Charles.
So he had a track record of helping law enforcement with technical matters.
A documented track record. This demonstrates that authorities were likely well aware of his genuine expertise and background in information security. Yet, according to Alberto, they chose to persecute him anyway.
Which raises that question of motive again.
It really does. Was the system just inadvertently targeting someone highly knowledgeable due to incompetence? Or was it perhaps something more deliberate? Was it easier to target him than to admit their own lack of understanding? Or perhaps investigate the mutualista's own security failings more deeply? We don't know, but the question hangs there.
This whole section really shows that this isn't just about an individual case anymore. It throws a harsh spotlight on the critical, systemic need for a justice system that is both technically competent and profoundly ethically sound.
Absolutely.
A system truly capable of holding its own members accountable for their actions and their inactions. The fight for justice, as we've heard so clearly from Alberto's experience, is often a very long, emotionally draining, and financially taxing one. Even after a favorable legal outcome, like the order to return his property, is initially obtained.
It becomes a relentless battle.
It really does. A battle not just against the initial charges, but against deep-seated systemic resistance, and in this case, perceived corruption and incompetence. The key insight here really feels like the fight for justice often extends far beyond the courtroom. It becomes this prolonged, exhausting battle against bureaucratic inertia and a system sometimes seemingly resistant to accountability. So let's zoom out a bit. What's the broader takeaway here for us, for the listeners? Alberto's story, as harrowing as it is, isn't merely a personal anecdote of misfortune, right?
No, it's much more than that. It's a stark, real-world illustration of several critical issues facing society today, particularly in this ever-evolving realm of digital security and fundamental individual rights.
What's the first big issue it highlights for you?
For me, it vividly highlights the inherent danger when law enforcement authorities lack a fundamental, up-to-date understanding of digital technologies. Things like cryptocurrencies, or the complex tools and methodologies used daily in information security.
Like not knowing plastic bitcoins aren't real.
Exactly. Or misunderstanding data volumes so profoundly. As Alberto emphatically states, a security professional must understand how the bad guys operate, how they exploit vulnerabilities in order to effectively protect against them. Without that foundational knowledge, you are simply, as he put it, incompetent in this field when investigating such crimes.
And that incompetence has real consequences.
Devastating consequences. As we've seen, this critical gap in understanding can directly lead to false accusations, gross mishandling of evidence, and ultimately profound injustice for individuals caught in the system.
Okay, so lack of technical competence is one major theme. What else?
Well, zooming out, what does this tell us about ensuring accountability and preventing similar situations? Placing this within that larger context, this case powerfully underscores the vital role of transparent processes.
Things being done openly, documented properly.
Yes. And continuous, proper training for law enforcement. and an unwavering commitment to human rights within any justice system, especially as technology advances at such a bewildering pace.
And the power dynamics. That seemed crucial in the interrogation.
Absolutely. The power dynamics at play during Alberto's interrogation were deeply concerning. Those explicit threats against his family, the interrogator's refusal to even identify himself, and Alberto's perception of the enjoyment of power by officials like Wilson Rodríguez.
The smile.
The smile. These are stark, unsettling reminders of the inherent vulnerability of citizens when confronted by unchecked authority. This kind of behavior, often cloaked under the guise of official duty, systematically erodes public trust. Trust in the very institutions designed to protect justice and uphold the law.
And it speaks directly to the profound emotional and psychological toll, too, doesn't it? Beyond just the legal and technical stuff, there's that deeply human element that's just impossible to ignore.
Absolutely impossible. The severe and lasting mental health consequences Alberto experienced, his PTSD diagnosis, the severe depression, his tragic inability to work for 5 years, they underscore unequivocally that the impact of these events extends dramatically beyond the legal outcome.
It's not just about winning or losing the case.
Not at all. These are not merely inconveniences or minor setbacks. They are life-altering traumas. They demand our collective attention and empathy, reminding us constantly of the very real human cost when systems fail.
And the evidence handling, the contamination issues.
Right. The meticulous details Alberto provides about how evidence was, allegedly, so egregiously mishandled from those incomplete, potentially misleading records to catastrophically contaminated devices, like that cell phone being connected to a police network for 5 days.
Those aren't just technicalities.
They are absolutely not just technicalities. They directly undermine the entire premise of a fair legal process. If the chain of custody is broken, if evidence is contaminated, or if it can even be argued that it might have been manipulated,
Then the foundation crumbles.
the very foundation of the case becomes suspect. It could lead to wrongful convictions, or, as in this instance, a prolonged and devastating ordeal even when the initial charges don't hold up.
It's a fundamental breakdown of integrity, really.
Right.
And it should alarm anyone concerned with justice, with due process, and with the protection of individual liberties in our modern digital society.
Indeed, and a powerful recurrent lesson from Alberto's ordeal is that constant refrain about documentation. Everything needing to be meticulously registered, reflected in the expediente, the official case file.
If it wasn't recorded, it wasn't done.
Exactly. As he so succinctly put it, this highlights the absolute, non-negotiable importance of comprehensive documentation. It's a fundamental safeguard in all legal processes. It's robust individual protection against fabricated or altered facts.
And despite everything, he's still fighting.
Remarkably, yes. Despite the immense suffering, despite the constant feeling that more rocks are put in our path, Alberto and his mother are actively and courageously pursuing further legal action.
That takes incredible resilience.
It demonstrates remarkable resilience, yes, a deep commitment to ensuring justice and an unwavering belief that accountability must ultimately prevail, even when the system itself seems designed to obstruct it. This ongoing frustration with bureaucratic hurdles, the alleged corruption within the system, it really points to a broader societal need, a need for sustained vigilance and for continuous reform. It reminds us that the pursuit of true justice isn't a one-off event, it's an ongoing collective responsibility.
Yeah.
The key insight here, I think, is that critical need for continuous reform, for technical literacy within justice systems, for ethical oversight globally, all necessary to keep pace with digital evolution and to truly protect individual rights. #tag outro.
We've taken a journey through a truly, truly harrowing experience today. One that touches profoundly on precise technical specifics, deep legal frustrations, and honestly, a truly remarkable human resilience.
It's quite a story.
It really is. Alberto's story reminds us that behind every case file, behind every headline, there are real lives and real, often devastating consequences. The intricate details, as we've explored today, often matter far more than the initial simplistic narratives might ever suggest.
And it brings us to a profound, lingering question, doesn't it? In our increasingly digital world, how do we best strike that delicate balance? The balance between the rigorous pursuit of justice on one hand and the ironclad protection of individual rights on the other.
Coupled with the integrity of evidence.
Absolutely. Coupled with the absolute integrity of digital evidence, and perhaps more pointedly, what responsibility do we, as informed citizens, have in advocating for and actively supporting systems that unequivocally uphold these core principles?
Ensuring competence, transparency,
Competence, transparency, ethics, ensuring these are not merely optional extras, but the non-negotiable foundations of our legal framework.
So thinking about everything we've heard today, what truly stands out to you from Alberto's story? Take a moment, maybe after this, to reflect on the immense implications. Implications of transparency, of accountability, and the incredible power sometimes of individual knowledge when confronted by deeply entrenched systemic challenges.